Here we go with this week's edition of The Public Square. We'll come up with a title for this program before the hour is up, I promise. But that's just the way it goes sometimes. These are unrehearsed conversations each week. And the team today, Dave Zanotti, Alan C. Duncan, Jeff Sanders, Melody Elsey, and I'm Wayne Shepherd. So we're going to talk about depopulation. Did we get it wrong recently talking about this, Dave?
What would happen if you put together a radio broadcast that goes out over hundreds of radio stations and you got it wrong?
Oh, boy.
How would you feel? Is that like worse? That's worse than the dog eating your homework? That's worse than getting an F on your term paper?
I want to say been there, done that, but I don't know if I can admit that or not. So,
I mean, but to be completely wrong, I mean, absolutely wrong. And then what would you do to try to make it up? It's like that old story that if you cut open a feather pillow on top of a mountain in the breeze, and it's like that's what happens when you start a gossip and a lie, and now you can never get all the feathers back. I mean, these are all the nightmares that you heard in Sunday school or that your parents told you about, why you should never tell a lie. And this is the kind of stuff that causes people to not want to do radio or television or YouTube or just not to say anything out loud at all for fear of being wrong. So what if we got it wrong?
Okay, what are you talking about now? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, we've been for the last 20 years talking about depopulation in the United States of America, but talking about global depopulation. And in 2023, right after the fall of Roe versus Wade, the abortion industry came forward with the most massive campaign. I mean, they clearly knew, I don't know whether it was the Alito leak or they had known for years it was inevitable, but the abortion industry had hundreds of millions of dollars to spend to begin to alter state constitutions to make abortion the law of the land, just the way they had it under Roe v. Wade and even more, and go state by state to do it. Well, you knew that was going to happen in certain states that even had legalized abortion before Roe versus Wade. That was inevitable based upon some states like New York and California are so liberal that God knows if they could ever come back to a true life position. But that's where they are. But what people didn't expect is that hundreds of millions of dollars would be spent to tip states like Ohio. And then what people even expected less was that Ohio, that has always been a pro-life state and polled pro-life and elected statewide pro-life candidates, would fall for the advertising campaign based upon a single case of a couple that said they had a hard pregnancy and that the laws in Ohio served them so poorly that their lives were at risk. And everybody bought the sob story, and the sob story wasn't even true. We didn't think that was possible. No one actually looked back and said, how have we changed as a culture for the last 50 years? Now, fortunately, pro-life forces have gathered strength, and in the last election in 2024, they defeated 3 statewide abortion proposals. Now, some more won, but basically the other side had been 8-0. They'd been undefeated. So now suddenly the fight's becoming fair again as people adjust. But in the process of all of that strategy, what we came to realize after walking through all these ballot initiatives was that people were working on a fact base that was at least 50 years old. I mean, we'd be talking to people, they'd be saying, well, how could you lose this? And then they quote a fact, and I'd say, well, do you know that fact isn't even relevant anymore? Do you know this is? And so we went back from the end of 23 through the entire year of 24 and created a document called Abortion in America. It's over 60 pages of data on what abortion looks like today, what the market looks like today, what political attitudes are like today, and how the issues have changed. And over the last 50 years, something bigger than abortion has come to light, and that's depopulation. The fact that the civilized world has become so anti-life by choice that we are actually extinguishing the human race country by country. Now, we had been talking about this for years, but after 23 and 24 and all the new data, it came screaming out from all of the data. And we discovered that we weren't alone. I'm holding in my hands right now a document that no one would ever believe we'd be quoting on the public square from the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, one of the Davos-linked, Soros-backed danger zones of the universe that agrees with everything our research has proven. The age of depopulation, surviving a world gone gray, December 2024. All right, the data is overwhelming. So we've been talking louder and louder and louder about this, about what's happened. Under Roe, we've got a 50-year depopulation problem because we have an anti-life problem. Well, the Atlantic evidently is paying attention to us because we got one article from the Atlantic that we covered a couple of weeks ago talking about this fact, and then there seemed to be a rebuttal. It seemed like an article came forward saying those depopulation people, what they really are is pronatalists, and they're wrong. Wayne, I read the article. I got up in the middle of the night. I wrote everybody and said, oh my gosh, we must be wrong. So that's what brought us to today's broadcast.
Say it ain't so, Joe.
It ain't so.
So the question is, are we wrong? So let's put up, if you will, let me tell you what happened. Here comes the article. And the article came from the Atlantic. It says, why the left should embrace pronatalism. It was February 25, 2025. Now, for those of you that are brand new, why do we consistently take on organizations and their publications like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Atlantic? Because we recognize there are very few sources left on the left side of politics that do any form of intellectual research and publication. And if you're looking for where the brain trust is right now in the progressive left, it comes through the offices and the publications of the Atlantic. Now, the Atlantic Monthly is one of the three oldest surviving publications in the United States, goes back to the Civil War. So as a magazine. So they've earned the credibility of being listened to because they've been around so long. So the intelligentsia on the left and academia in particular listens to the Atlantic. So here comes this article from the Atlantic, why the left should embrace pronatalism. Sidebar right from the start, pronatalism. Everyone go to the dictionary right now. And guess what? Jeff?
It's a brand new word. You know, I was waking up this morning hoping that no one would call me a pronatalist. You know, but when I first saw the word a couple of weeks ago, I looked at it very quickly and I said, pronatalist? What is that? Pronatal.
Pronatalism.
And then I just broke it down into the etymology.
It's a hair tonic, yeah. Right.
Yeah, right.
More babies is good.
Yeah. Having, I am for birth. I am for babies. Oh, that's a bad somebody out there has to come up with some kind of pejorative term to make it sound like it's bad to have babies.
That was Alan's beef several weeks ago, remember? Now you get called a name because you want to have 3 kids or more?
What is wrong with you to come at me because I want to have children?
My thing would be who wouldn't be a pronatalist. Well, and Melanie, you had a nice quote before we turned the mics on today.
I know a few.
Isn't God pronatalist? Be fruitful and multiply.
Be fruitful and multiply.
Blessed is the man whose quiver is full.
Just creating human biology in the first place.
Yeah. So, come to think of it, those are all really good points. So the word natalist, from which we get pronatalist, of course, obviously Latin. That's the Latin and the Greek and goes back through France. And so, no. Natalist didn't show up in the dictionary until 1971.
Huh.
And it means to be pro-child. So this is new terminology, folks.
So pronatalist is pro-child?
It's redundant.
Are you a pre-pronatalist? I'm not sure.
That's people who want twins.
Really pro-child.
Yeah, pro.
Here's the premise that comes right out in the Atlantic article. Watch this. Big if, it starts in the subheadline, if concerns about population decline are sometimes overstated. Oops, what? Excuse me, did someone just slap me across the face twice?
Yeah,
If concerns about population decline are sometimes overstated, the effects of an aging society are generally troubling from a pro-social point of view. By Elizabeth Brunig for The Atlantic. Now, Mrs. Brunig got a master's degree in Christian theology from, I believe it's Cambridge University. So she is a studied person. She is a well-written person, to be sure. And here's how she starts her article out. Last year, a wave of media attention to this growing right-wing push for babies arrayed progressives against the tech world's particular vision of a richly populous future. with left-wing thinkers stipulating that high-profile conservatives are simply wrong about falling birth rates. Here comes a quote. "To be clear," said Sophie Alexander and Dana Hull, who wrote last summer in Bloomberg, "the world's population is not declining. The overwhelming majority of experts trust the data from the United Nations, which projects that the global figure will keep rising to a peak of more than 10 billion people by the year 21,000, and quote, the article continues. The implication of those data is that conservatives are specifically concerned about birth rates in white Western countries. All right, here we go. 1, we got our math wrong. 2, we're racists. 3, oh my gosh, it's time for the first time since 1989, we have to have a complete and total retraction and beg for mercy for being bad math people and white racists.
And on that happy note, we're going to take a break. And say it ain't so, Joe. Melanie says it ain't so. All right. Well, we'll explore that coming up on The Public Square. You stay with us here and online at thepublicsquare.com.
Front Steps, a true story of how a child's love for reading helped change the world. Share it with those you love today. Visit thefrontstepsbook.com. That's thefrontstepsbook.com.
Let's see, there's our tithe, food and clothing budget, taxes, all the insurance, and the car payments. Where's the line in your budget that helps pay the bill for fixing what's wrong in America? Log on today at aproundtable.org and join the growing team that's giving every month to get America back on track. Make your monthly contribution to aproundtable.org. Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Back with you on the Public Square now. Pretty interesting open, I would say, but we've got a lot to talk about here today, Dave.
Melanie, I guess we're wrong, so I apologize. We didn't report in with our den mother, and you usually keep us from making mistakes. So I'm sorry. Can you bail us out of this?
Well, it's easy to check statistics. It just isn't hard when you do a simple search. You can. We even ended up with a study that came out of the United Nations just from last year. So the populations across the world are shrinking. And just to give you a concrete example, when we talk about the fertility rate, it has to be, replacement rate is 2.1 babies per childbearing woman. So South Korea, lowest fertility rate in the world, is 0.68, almost a half a child per woman. So the example that was provided in what we were reading, 200 children give their children birth to 68. Their grandchildren would be 23 grandchildren. And then out of the 23 grandchildren, 8 great-grandchildren. Wow. So that's a steady decline for the country of South Korea.
Wow. And what was the source on that again?
That source came out of the First Atlantic article, The Loneliness of the Conservative Pronatalist.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, remember, this piece we're reading right now is called, the title of it is Why the Left Should Embrace Pronatalism. So they're quoting, in this piece we're looking at right now, they're quoting figures on the left who are saying we're wrong. But the piece itself, I don't think is making that case. I think the piece is trying to side with us in a roundabout way. They're quoting the left-wing voices saying we're wrong.
And so let me show you the level of sensitivity that I have to wanting to be right, and that as an organization we really are feeling together. And that's the fact that when someone starts off saying that pronatalists are using inflated numbers, overstating their case, I stop dead in my tracks because I don't want to be that person. I don't want to have what we call evangelistic numbers.
Right.
I don't want to be in a point of exaggeration at any point in time. There's no merit there. We're too old for that. We've been around too long. And so the premise of this author, while it does appear that she is trying to sincerely write on a favorable to our position, she starts off with a premise that is so objectionable that you have to stop, drop, and roll right there and say, wait a second. The United Nations has debunked the depopulation myth. Well, wait a second. I'm sitting here with this Foreign Affairs article, and the Foreign Affairs article is making it with more skill and more drama than I would have ever expected from the CFR. And so, wait a minute, doesn't the Council on Foreign Relations and the United Nations, are they not on the same page? Are they not looking at the same math? Then what really flipped me out was when we got a little language from the COVID era talking about the majority of experts trust the data from the United Nations. And all of a sudden I went, oh no, I don't trust the science? Oh no, what's going to happen to me?
Well, the report that came out just last year, Dave, really says that more than half of all of the countries across the globe, the live birth rate is less than the replacement rate.
Yeah, there's only one area of the world where they are continuously gaining in population. God bless them. That's wonderful. And that would be sub-Saharan Africa. Like Nigeria, for example, is on track soon to have almost 400 million people in their nation. They're mineral-rich, highly educated people, and they're doing very well.
Let's go to the premise of the big number, which is that the United Nations says world population is continuing to grow and will do so until 2100. Okay? Excuse me, that's only 75 years away.
Yeah, there's people alive right now who will see that date.
That's a blip in time.
Well, and that report states that 63 countries, the population size has already peaked. Already peaked.
Whoa. You said what?
63 countries, their population size for the country has already reached its peak.
This is according to the United Nations, Wayne. And those 63 countries contain 28% of the world's population. But wait, there's more. All right. In 48 countries, that's 48 and let's see, Rob's not here to do the math today, so this is probably going to be wrong. But if I take 63 and 48, that means 111 countries. In 48 countries, with 10% of the world's population size is projected to peak between 2025 and 2054. Oh, so wait a second. We've now got 40% of the world's population is already cooked by 2025. That's this year.
Well, and by extension, when you have a declining population, each generation, you're going to have less women in childbearing ages.
So Western Europe is just over with then?
The United States is over with? Canada? China? So
so there goes Italy, there goes France, there goes Great Britain. I mean, there's no way they can reverse this is what we're saying. Is that it?
Well, look, I think you're just being too dramatic, Jeff. You don't need to worry about this till to the year 2100. You just don't have to worry about it because the total gross number in the country in the world is going to be okay until 2100, 75 years from now. And then everybody is completely cooked.
I just want Italy to continue on so that Alan and I can get there again and see all the beautiful sights.
Should it be a ghost plan?
Eat the food. Well, we can just buy it. In that
there
case.
you go. Yeah.
Can we take a look at one anecdotal story out of Scripture?
Sure.
And that is Noah's family.
Yeah, right.
So at the time of the flood is all done now. It's just Noah and his sons, their families. Mm-hmm. So the population of the globe was pretty small. God said, be fruitful and multiply. Go out and grow. Mm-hmm. And where are we today? Over 4 billion? Closer to 6 or 7 billion?
I think it's 8 billion. We're at 8 billion.
7, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we started small.
Yeah, we started with 8 and we got 8 billion.
After the flood. So can it be reversed?
Yeah.
Isn't that proof that it can be reversed?
It can be done. Yeah, you've got some time. Mm-hmm.
Let me add paragraph from The Age of Depopulation from Foreign Affairs magazine. And again, that's published by the CFR, so we know the source. And we're not doing anything to give the source any credibility. We're just stating the source. Human beings have no collective memory of depopulation. Overall, global numbers last declined about 700 years ago in the wake of the bubonic plague that tore through much of Eurasia. In the following 7 centuries, the world's population surged almost 20-fold. And just over the past century, the human population has quadrupled. But now get this one. The last global depopulation was reversed by procreative power once the Black Death ran its course. This time around, a dearth of procreative power is the cause of humanity's dwindling numbers, a first in the history of the species. A revolutionary force drives the impending depopulation. That is, a worldwide reduction in the desire for children.
That's pretty sad. That's a sad commentary.
So this worldview is worse than the bubonic plague. That's what I heard.
We're doing this to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Melanie, what you described in that model about Korea, was it North Korea?
South Korea.
South Korea.
What you described in the model about South Korea, and first you have 200, then you have
68.
23,
68,
then you have 23, then you have 8. Okay, that's a very simple model. It's unassailable science. Without something that changes that, you can't change the science, because the science of population isn't built on wishing it to be so. It's built upon how many women of childbearing age, and that gives that number starts at like age 14. They start really young with that in the data, and takes women up past the age of 40. So they're taking the widest possible swath they can in age groups, but there's only so many people in that age. In other words, you can't. That's it. That's the only population you have to work with. And if by choice these folks have decided they're not going to bear children, or by societal forces, they really don't have the opportunity to do that in a responsible fashion. Once it starts downward, it reaches a point of no return.
How do you get inside people's heads so that they are no longer selfish and self-absorbed with their own comfort? I know people who have purposefully made choices not to have children. They would have been just as good a parents as anybody else. There's nothing psychologically wrong with them. There's nothing financially wrong with them. There is something spiritually wrong with them, I think. They have their dogs. They have their brie cheese and their wine and crackers, and they've got their lovely home, and they've got their beautiful car, and they've got everything they need.
So, all right, I got it. So that's one example, selfishness. Okay, but what other examples are there?
There's economic reasons. If you think about it, how many large families exist where both parents work full time?
Right. Yeah.
People say if we're going to have more children, we can't afford for both of us to work.
Well,
one of us would have to stay home and take care of the kids because one child care for one is $1,500 a month. Multiply that by 6, you've got a problem.
Yeah, they're facing that in Hungary, and Viktor Orban has said, okay, if you're going to have X number of children, you don't have to pay taxes for the rest of your life. They're doing everything they can, in Hungary at least, to reverse all of this with some success.
Public policies can actually help.
Yeah, Italy's trying.
We'll come back to that in just a moment on the Public Square. If you joined us late and you wonder, what in the world are they talking about? You got to go back to the beginning and listen, and we've made that easy to do through our website, thepublicsquare.com, or by using our smartphone app. It's free. Why not download it, put it on your smart device, and listen to this program whenever you want. The Public Square.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Thanks for listening to The Public Square today. Let's reset this conversation, Dave. How did this all begin?
Well, it began because for over 20 years we've been talking about depopulation. And in the last 2 years, we've reviewed all those numbers again, recognizing that the problem is much worse than when we actually began talking about it. And there are multiple reasons. Now, we got upended because the Atlantic came out with an article that basically made the claim that people like us who talk about depopulation are exaggerating the figures, or maybe they're exaggerating the figures, or probably because the trusted science and the math is in the United Nations. That was a quote that was placed in an article, not made by the author, but left unchallenged by the author and echoed by the author in the subtitle. Well, we know how to read. We pay attention to stuff like that. So that forced us to go back to the science at the United Nations. And what we discovered was a person was quoting the report was quoting one line of the report, but the details of the report blow that one line to smithereens. That was like a thread. We got to the rope line. And the rope line is, it is much worse in real numbers, in real time. And it is global. And yes, there will be so that's the point, Wayne, is we wanted to restate the case because there are challenges out there. So that's what brought us to where we are.
Yeah. We mentioned economics as an issue. Government policy many times has been an issue through the years in places like China.
You can make a case that taxation alone, and we've talked about, there's all kinds of reasons. The one was talked about selfishness, and then we talked about economics. Well, I would add as a subset of economics is tax policy.
Mm-hmm.
The United States income tax became an amendment to our Constitution. Remember, we didn't have income tax was illegal. We had to pass a constitutional amendment.
No, we can't remember that, actually, but that's history.
All right. Amendment 16, ratified February 3rd, 1913, the income tax. All right. By the time we get to 1948, the average American family of four is paying 2% in total federal taxation.
Wow.
And a fraction of that in state and local taxes. You want to know what happened to our population base?
That's right.
Well, eventually, as taxes rose post-World War II and kept rising to where we are now, people can't have more kids because they can't afford the child care. And the reason they can't afford the child care is because most of these families have 2, if not 3 or 4 jobs. And you can't raise children perpetually on child care. I mean, you can if you have no other option. But at one point in time, you get to the place where all you're doing with the other income is working to pay taxes and child care.
Yeah.
These are real numbers. We all know this. We've either lived them or we've got kids, we got grandkids. We know tax policy is huge. The size of government is growing, is bad for families.
One of the other critiques that this article at least brings forward, or whether they're making it or not, they at least bring it forward in quotes, is that somehow if you're talking about this, you might be racist and you only care about the white race growing. So it seems silly to even have to address this. But it's out there. What do you guys think about? Oh, and they also don't like some of the proponents of it. People like Elon Musk. Some of the people. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Well, there's 2 issues there. There's the fact it's a techno craze among the Silicon Valley people. Mm-hmm. I'll give them credit on that argument. The Silicon Valley people, no matter who they are, or whether they live in Silicon Valley or whether they're in the tech world or not, people who think that the answer to this is to simply procreate irresponsibly, to have kids, whatever, anywhere, anyplace, anytime. No, that's not the way it works.
That's not what we're talking
is
about.
not the same as parenting.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You're not just seeding the earth with your children.
It's not just a volume question because the key to being able to sustain productivity in regards to procreation is solid, stable families where people can rise up and if you think about it, God is our provider. That's one of the things that we've lost in the reality of this country. We really, because we stopped reading the Bible, we stopped figuring out who really does run this, who really does love this, love us and love all of this, and who really wants to provide for us. So we go out and do this on our own, and we get wiped out in a fallen world. And then we blame God. Okay, that's kind of the way that the Western world functions, particularly in the United States of America. But the truth of the matter is, your greatest economic asset is the family structure in which you're born. You don't have to, I didn't mean you have to be rich to be successful. I mean, a family that stays together grows. And as families grow, things get better as the generations go forward, as people stick together. Check the history. That's the way it works. And that is irregardless in the United States of race. Now, we've put racial obstacles. I can't say we, I'm speaking in the royal we here. Our society in certain regions of our country has made progress easier among all races or harder. I know that history. In spite of that, you still see the direct correlation between family unity and economic prosperity. It is inescapable. So the idea of just, as Alan, you said, seeding the universe, no, that's not how it works.
And the racist question's ridiculous because even the UN report that's entitled World Population Prospects 2024, they're looking at every country across the globe.
Oh, yeah.
And the countries that are in the 63 countries where the population has already peaked, those include China, Germany, Japan, Russia. They're not looking at
Mexico.
And the ones that are declining by 14% over the next 30 years include Puerto Rico, Moldova, Bosnia, Albania. It's not just Western countries.
Yeah, whenever I hear this talked about on any serious level, I hear it talked about as a global problem, and nobody's happy about that.
You look at Japan. Japan's losing population.
Speaking just personally, I don't want to see any ethnicity of people go extinct. I think that God loves all the colors of the rainbow.
He created all the colors of the rainbow.
So I'm for all ethnicities flourishing. I'm not saying race on purpose because I think there's just one race, the human race, but I'm for all ethnicities flourishing.
As I think we all are. So what we've got is a situation where when you do the math doesn't add up. So Wayne, I guess what it comes down to is we didn't get it wrong. We did get it right.
Surprise.
Why would someone in the Atlantic feel like they needed to sort of slap around these pronatalists and make them understand that you slow down there? Whoa! If you want the leftists to join you, you got to back up a little now. And then spend their whole time. What's interesting, and you read this article, and then you read a second article written by the woman who was quoted in the first article. You get a little deeper, and that was an article we read in Slate magazine where some of these folks are talking on different podcasts, and it kind of lets you know what they really think about pronatalists, about how pronatalists are either the extreme of Elon Musk and the tech billionaires, or they're these really weird, fringe, wacky people who look like they're trying to build their own reality show. And they dress funny, and their whole world is weird. And
sounds like an alien, doesn't it? A pronatalist. Yeah. I smile every time you say the word. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they make like Handmaid's Tale look like a moderate story. I mean, they just go way out there. All right, so we go way out on the extremes. Look, there's nothing extreme about simple math. It's just the numbers. And you say, well, why do you guys care this much about this? Well, I think God cares, for God so loved this world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth upon him should not perish but have everlasting life. God said that to Nicodemus as they were talking about the new birth. Mm-hmm. God loves seeing people born and seeing their souls saved because he's not done loving this world yet.
And he has a generational vision. I tell parents all the time, you're not raising your children just to get to be the age of 18. You are raising the parents of your grandchildren.
Wow.
And, with that vision comes the whole recipe for family, God's design for family. And we were just talking a little bit ago before we came into studio about what a blessing it is to have children and grandchildren, and how as I'm getting older, they are turning around and meeting our needs as well.
I think we need to talk more about that, and we'll do it next here on The Public Square. You stay with us.
We will be right back for more on The Public Square.
And we're back with the Public Square this week. Dave Zanotti is here, along with Alan C. Duncan, our producer, Jeff Sanders, Melanie Elsey. I'm Wayne Shepherd. What an interesting topic, though, as we think more deeply about our world. I really appreciate the conversation, guys. Alan?
Well, I wish that our listeners could have been around the table with us right before we turned the microphones on. Sometimes that's some of the stuff we really wish we could share with folks. But as we were waiting to get the session started today, we knew what we were talking about. So we were all sharing experiences with our kids. You all were sharing experiences with your grandkids. And Wayne was texting us images of Lego trucks and cars.
Now the secret's out. Oh no.
Yeah. That he's been building with his grandson. And so it was just very cool.
Even on FaceTime.
Yes.
Yeah, well, he lives in another part of the country, but he's discovered FaceTime and his mother's smartphone, so he often calls up, and we'll spend anywhere from 30 minutes to 90 minutes just at the end of his day, just building Legos together and talking. I mean, that's being a grandpa.
That's one of the coolest things I've ever heard. Jeff, how about that? That is way cool.
I am so jealous.
Did he show you? Did Wayne show you his Lego pickup truck?
Yes. Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And there's a Lego car with lights on it too. Really cool.
Hey,
The pickup truck, for the listeners, if you've ever seen the Christmas card that has the red, old red pickup truck with the Christmas tree in the back,
pickup truck.
that's
we've
what
used
Wayne's
that,
pickup truck
it's
looks
the
like.
1950s model. It's very cool.
Yeah. Hey, it's my era, baby. All right.
Let's get that picture to Anna. Maybe she can use that picture for some promotional stuff.
If Wayne signs off
Come
on it.
and see Wayne's pickup truck.
Since you spilled the beans, Alan, I'll just say that I hope he remembers that. I mean, we talk about, legacy as grandparents, and, we live a long ways apart, and I want him to remember. And it also keeps my mind active. It's like doing a jigsaw puzzle. It's hopefully that'll guard against those memory losses that'll come eventually someday. So
the secret is out, Wayne. So what we're talking about is people loving people, and I want to come back to this question about trying to cast this as anti-science. Well, on this one, folks, the science is on the side of children. The science is on the side, and they can strain at a gnat here and swallow the camel. You can try all you want to pull that thread about 2100. Even if you were right, it's 75 years away, and then everybody is done in regards to the math and the fall off the cliff that Melanie talked about. Look, this is the science. This is reality. We go back to 700 years. It hasn't changed. The math hasn't changed.
What did you all make? I kept seeing the word eugenics pop up. They're trying to tie wanting more children to the eugenics movement, which
I wanted to give space. Yeah.
These are the people who are for eugenics historically.
Yeah, I mean, I get what they're saying, but eugenics, as started in the early 1900s, was a birth control movement trying to weed out births.
I think they're using it in context of controlling the population growth in certain areas and not.
Well, and some of it was these rich Silicon Valley folks who want to populate their own genome out there. So I get what they mean, but they need to go back and look at the history of eugenics. That was a birth stopping movement, not a more birth movement.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when you go back to that history, you can't get past the name of Margaret Sanger.
Right.
Because she was one of the leaders, the proud leaders in that community of time in the 1920s, late 20s, when the world of eugenics began. She began her operation in 1928. And one of the stated purposes that was celebrated among the scientific and economic elites was the idea that they were going to eliminate the inferior races. There's You
very publicly
can dance
they
around
discussed
that all
that.
you
Yes.
want.
And there were people in the 1930s and 40s who took up that banner and practiced eugenics all over Europe under the banner of National Socialism from Germany. Just go look that up. They proudly said that they were for eugenics and wiped out millions of people.
Yeah. So to try to blend those two and then throw on racism on top of it, no, that is deflection. And I mean, it almost gets to where it becomes laughable deflection because we've all grown so used to it.
You know when they're losing an argument when they throw that down and call you a racist.
Sure. But what's odd is that when they throw that down, then they're literally bringing Margaret Sanger into the conversation, which brings us, Wayne, back to the conversation that we had just a week ago when we took on the New York Times and Planned Parenthood and had a conversation. Now that is sort of 2 weeks in a row of taking on the giants, if you will, because 3 weeks ago we talked about Caleb and Joshua. And you remember that we talked about Caleb saying, where's that mountain where the giants live? That's where I want to go. And so that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
The question that I think then comes to the table is, one, why would you take on sources of such size and take on sources of such wealth and engage? What are you, crazy? I mean, this is a real good way to get wiped out. And who's going to believe you versus believing the Atlantic and believing Planned Parenthood and believing the New York Times and so on and so forth? Well, here's the point. What happens if they finally are coming to the light? I mean, the New York Times delivered an expose of unprecedented proportions, indicting and condemning Planned Parenthood for botched procedures and exhausted staff. And I mean, they stopped short of criminal words, but they went right up to the edge.
They labeled it a crisis.
Yeah, labeled it a crisis. They absolutely. Do you know, we've been watching. Has anybody seen that story from the New York Times? That allegation, that indictment? Have anybody seen that story circulating anywhere?
Not a whisper. Nowhere.
Nope.
Not a whisper. Alan, that's the point for hit the crickets button right there. That's where it would
I muted that channel. I found a way to mute the channel. But Dave, I am holding the latest edition, the hard copy. We do, as we say many times, we subscribe to these publications. So I'm holding the latest Atlantic magazine. This is March 2025 edition. There's an article in here by Olga Kazan. It's entitled "Who's Your Mommy?" and it's kind of a story, kind of a memoir type piece. I have not read the whole thing, but I've been skimming through it as we've been talking, and it's about motherhood. So I do think that the Atlantic is catching on, but I think they know their readership. And they're trying to baby step them along. No pun intended. They're trying to baby step them along.
That's pretty funny, though.
Yeah,
you have to admit, Wayne, that was pretty good.
You know what? Pun intended.
Yeah.
I meant it.
By the way, in case you're wondering, baby stepping, that clearly is a term that goes back to Bill Murray. What about Bob?
What about
Dreyfus?
Bob? Yeah.
And
we know that
Bill
one.
Murray was on Rogan just the other day. So once again, I caught you watching Rogan because you did a Bill Murray line. There we go.
Did you watch that, Dave? I've been meaning to ask. Did you watch that? Yeah.
Finish your point.
Okay, you'll tell me off air, I'm sure.
Focus, boys, focus.
The last line in this piece, in the current edition of The Atlantic, the last line says, "Having someone who loves you, I've decided, is a good reason to have kids." So that's the final piece. I haven't read the whole piece yet, but The Atlantic is publishing somebody who's saying simply having someone to love you would be a good enough reason to have a kid.
Wow. Who knew you could have a tear in your eye reading The Atlantic, huh?
What's really interesting is when you were referencing that article, the first thing that popped into my mind was my daughter she was going through her university training to become a teacher. And this was 15 years ago at least. She was assigned to do a response to an article that was, in summary, it was describe the reasons why it's a horrible thing to become a mother.
Whoa.
And she had to write a response to defend that, which she couldn't do. So she took the opposite of the assignment, jeopardizing her chance to get a good grade.
Wow.
But, that was at a state university in a teacher preparation program 15 years ago.
Do you think we could find that assignment?
I can ask her if she
That
still
would be
has
really
the remnants
interesting.
of
That would be
that.
good. Yeah. All right. I would say don't go anywhere, but some of you don't have a choice. A few of you have to leave us now. If that's the case, you can catch the rest of our conversation on The Public Square at thepublicsquare.com. Our final segment coming up. So as we talk about depopulation today in the public square, let's return to the conversation with our team here, including Dave Zanotti.
Wayne, we're talking about a UN report, we're talking about an Atlantic article, we're talking about a foreign affairs report, and basically refreshing the math and the data and challenging the premise that there is indeed a depopulation crisis, that it is real for America, it's real for the whole world, and you can't pull the covers over your head and say it's going to just go away, because it isn't. It's happened before in the world. It happened before in the world. It goes back 700 years to the bubonic plague. And it's devastating. So this is a genuine challenge. The United Nations report includes this particular comment. It says, quote, "This report comes at a time when the demographic landscape of many countries is changing rapidly, often creating anxiety and confusion. Due to faster than anticipated declines in fertility for some of the world's most populous countries, the size of the global population now appears likely to peak within the current century, probability at 80%. Remember that 80% number. This represents a major shift in perspective compared to the outlook 1 decade earlier, when the estimated probability that global population growth would end during the 21st century was around 30%. 10 years ago, this conversation had a 30% possibility of being scientifically accurate. 10 years later, it's at an 80% rate of possibility.
So it's kind of like things are coming into focus then. You're actually understand. There's a better understanding of the data. There's more data. Even just having more data helps to understand that trend.
And I found this so interesting because Foreign Affairs basically made the case that this, for the first time in the history of the human species, is a depopulation trending toward extinction based upon human choice. We as a collective species are making a choice. We've talked about the causes today, and there are many, and we didn't certainly get to all of them.
Right.
One of the reasons that we didn't have time to talk about was the perfection culture. And I think that truly is difficult because people are now so intent on being perfect. Anywhere I go, I watch and I see young people taking pictures, which is wonderful, exciting, cell phones, all that sort of stuff. But it sort of surprises me to watch how professional they've become in their posing and in their setups. I see you all shaking your heads. You've all seen it. There's no more spontaneous. Remember when candid shots were what it was all about? Now everything is postured for the internet. And it's like, really? I mean, that's all denotes the perfection culture. We've all seen people who dress in the tone of the perfection culture, whether the fashion suits them well or not. We know the pressure on people where it's the perfect or nothing. And so they're choosing nothing when it comes to their long-term relationships and family commitments. And the longer people take to shake out of the perfection culture, the older they are before they're married, it's a big problem. One of the polls that came out of all this research indicated that the majority of women in the United States of America wish they had children, and the number they wished for was 3. So the point is that evidently now the vast majority of women in America are pronatalists.
Well, and this means that men have to make sure that they step up and that they're ready to be husbands and fathers, and that they're committed to a family life and that relationship.
Yeah, I guess we got to get back to the basics. Melvin, you were making a point a minute ago.
Well, we were just, sort of ambling through the different causes of depopulation. And one of the, I think, predominant causes now globally is all of the different wars that are happening, killing hundreds of thousands of people, including children, but killing people who are of childbearing age. Wars are devastating not only economically, but they're also devastating from a population perspective.
Yeah, and who's going to start a family during a war?
Right.
During wartime.
And who can when
Wow.
you're separated? Because even in some countries, husbands and wives are splitting, saying, take the children and get out of here. I'll go and do X, Y, and Z, and you guys go this direction. So they're not together to be able to have children.
And in all of these statistics, none of them can project or include warfare.
Correct.
These numbers don't include that. And we know that just in Ukraine alone, there have been millions of people lost.
Yeah, between Russia and Ukraine, at least 1 million. Probably, we don't know the full number.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no intention. You can't build a pandemic into this. You don't know. This is only the things that they see coming on the natural order, not the things that might happen. So we're on shaky ground. And I think the first thing we have to do is to see if we can get out of the realm of denial and acknowledge the fact that for whatever series of combinations of reasons, the idea that not having children is better than having them, well, we quoted this before. Scripture says there is a way that seems right to a man. And you could say there's a way that seems right to men and women, and the way they're in is death. We're whistling past a graveyard here.
Mm-hmm.
And no, we didn't get our math wrong. Now, Wayne, I want to close with this. People say, well, kind of having fun watching you on this tight wire. You guys all together. I mean, you've been together for a long time. In 1989 on the radio, 1980 as an organization. We've been on every day somewhere in this country since 1989. And we've been together as a team doing this kind of exact long format programming since 2007, before podcasting was even a word. Okay. And we were looking at all the different products that we create now in radio communications and now video communications. And somebody's got to bring this stuff together and put the story out. Now, we don't want to be the only one doing it.
Right.
We really don't. There needs to be many, many, many more people than us doing this. It's a big world. It's a big nation. We got a lot of people to talk to, and nobody can do it alone. But I'll tell you, Wayne, if it wasn't for the support of the people who are helping us and the wonderful stations that carry this program, we wouldn't have a chance.
Yeah. Earlier, you were asking, why do we talk about this stuff? The word that popped in my head is truth. Remember, we used to talk about truth with a capital T? We haven't mentioned that lately.
Well, and the truth can set you free. It always does.
Yeah. It may, yeah.
Because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And one other point we should make is that we don't come at this from a perspective of despair, because we're not in charge of all this. Now, there is a premise of biblical Christianity that's true. Now, there are many people who claim to be Christian who don't accept this premise. But the truth is that Jesus said that all authority in heaven and earth has been given unto him. And then he told us, go, therefore, and make disciples of all the nations.
Mm-hmm.
The Apostle Paul writes about that in the book of Colossians, saying he is before all things. Jesus is before all things, and in him all things hold together. We believe that biblical revelation gives us the answer to this question, that there is truth to be found. You say, well, what about the people who can't have children? Well, of course we understand that.
Sure.
Right? I mean, that's a part of it too. Right? And some people will go forward without ever being able to conceive children or ever able to adopt children. It doesn't make anybody lesser than. We understand that. But the problem isn't there. The problem is that somehow having children and raising a family has gone out of style, but it hasn't gone out of our hearts. And that's the loneliness that Billy Graham spoke about for a generation. People are lonelier than ever. Part of that reason is because we're losing families.
We have more connections than ever, but we're more lonely than ever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we couldn't do this without the wonderful support of the people who listen to this program, and we thank you for your support. We want you to know that. We don't talk about it all that much here. We're so busy with the issues. It's a simple thing to do, and I always want to remind people that the only reason we have the courage to ask is because everyone on this show is a donor, and every one of us in this program is a donor, and we were all donors before we were ever on the radio. And so we've been doing this together for a long time, and we certainly invite you into the fellowship. Come on in. We'd love to have you.
Yep. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Alan, Melanie, Jeff. Thank you all for listening to The Public Square. There's a challenge for all of us, and we hope to hear from you. See you next time.
The The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.